What if I told you a man bought a ranch for just $5? A place left to rot in the shadows of Colorado's San Juan Mountains. When Daniel Kearns, a soldier more scarred than whole, turned the key, he didn't find emptiness. He found ash that still lingered, a brown Mustang with eyes that refused to bow, and remnants of a story that should have stayed buried. The wind knifed down the valley as he drove in, sharp with early snow. Peaks loomed like stone sentinels, white dust crowning their shoulders. Beneath them, fences sagged and fields lay brittle, as if the land itself had grown too weary to stand. Daniel's old Ford groaned as it climbed, his stiff leg aching where shrapnel had torn him years before. He pressed on, clinging to one fragile hope, that silence might be enough to drown out the memories that clawed at him when night closed in. Durango had shrunk. A few storefronts buzzed faintly with neon, but most were hollow, their windows dust-clouded, doors chained. Daniel parked near a faded office where a warped board hung above the door. Linden Real Estate, inside. The air reeked of mildew and paper gone soft with age. Behind a battered desk sat Margaret Linden, her gray hair knotted back, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue in her frame. She asked if he was looking for land or just passing through. He told her he wanted something forgotten. She slid a file across the desk, its corners curled. 80 acres, abandoned, $5. Daniel frowned at the absurdity. Margaret only shrugged. The owner didn't care. No inspections, no questions, just sign. Her voice carried no pitch, only resignation, as though she was handing him a place the world had already erased. Suspicion tugged at him. Nothing this cheap came without a price. But the hunger for solitude pressed stronger. Signed. Margaret stamped the paper and slid it to him. The ranch was his, the asphalt thinned to gravel. Dust curled behind his truck as he rattled through ridges and collapsed barns. At last the ranch appeared, sagging as if the earth itself no longer believed in it. The house leaned with broken windows, the barn's doors dangled from their hinges. Silence pressed against him, not peaceful but grave-like. He stepped out, boots crunching on brittle grass, and smelled it. Not just dust and rot, but ash, faint and fresh. Instinct sharpened. The prints on the porch, the streak across the doorknob, the half-drunk glass of water on the table inside signs of someone who should not have been there, the fireplace faintly warm. When he opened the barn, the shadows broke around a shape he hadn't expected. A brown Mustang stood at the center, ribs faint, but eyes blazing amber. The horse did not bolt, did not rear. It stared at him, unyielding, as if measuring whether he meant mercy or betrayal. Daniel whispered without thinking. He wasn't there to hurt it. In the corner lay relics of saddle stained with old blood, stamped with a military insignia, and a photograph of a young woman, her sorrow barely hidden behind her smile, her hand resting on this same horse. Whoever she was, her presence lingered, woven into the dust. The next morning, a knock startled him. Daniel's hand went to his knife before he opened the door. A woman stood wrapped in a shawl, her eyes sharp and bright. Helen Briggs, a neighbor, brought bread and preserves. Over coffee, she told him what he already half knew. The horse was named Thunder, raised from a foal by Clara Vance, the ranch's last owner. She had saved him when he was weak, nursed him through sickness, and the Mustang had been hers ever since. But Clara had been ill. That was when Victor Hale arrived, smooth words hiding sharper intent. He barred visitors, locked gates, and isolated her. When word came that Clara had died, Victor vanished, leaving Thunder locked in the barn to starve. The horse had survived only because he refused to die. Daniel's jaw clenched. He had seen men like Victor before, promises first, chains after. Days later, while cleaning the parlor, Daniel discovered a hollow beneath the floor. Inside was Clara's journal and an unfinished will. The early pages told of Thunder's growth. The later ones carried the desperation of a woman being cornered, Victor demanding signatures, threatening to take the horse. In her will, she named Daniel Kearns, or failing him, a conservation trust that would protect Thunder. He hadn't spoken to Clara in years, but her trust was inked on the page. He felt the weight of it settle like armor. Would not abandon her horse. He would not abandon her memory. He called Michael Vance, Clara's cousin. Michael admitted he'd distrusted Victor but hadn't had proof. Hearing of the journal broke him. Clara had believed Daniel was the one man who could be trusted. Daniel brought the journal to Samuel Reyes, a local attorney and fellow veteran. Reyes said it was enough to reopen the case. But Victor wouldn't surrender easily. He would threaten, pry into Daniel's past, perhaps worse. Reyes handed him a recorder. If Victor came, capture every word. Days later, a black SUV rolled into the yard. Victor stepped out in a tailored suit, his smile cold. He called the ranch a mess, told Daniel that real power lay in property and signatures, not fists. Daniel pressed the recorder in his pocket and replied calmly that he'd seen power before, and he'd seen it fall. Victor's smile faltered, turned and drove away. The courtroom was carved from sandstone, its oak doors scarred by decades of storms. Judge Draper presided, silver glasses perched on her nose. Victor sat confident beside his lawyer. Daniel sat across with Reyes, Helen behind him. Reyes read aloud from Claire's journal. Lynn testified how she had been turned away, how Thunder had been left to starve. Daniel spoke last. His voice was rough but steady as he described finding Thunder in the barn thin, scarred, still standing, his eyes refusing to yield. He told the court he had seen that look before, in war zones, in people waiting for mercy. The room fell silent. Even the judge's gaze softened. Victor's lawyer argued that Thunder was only an animal, property, nothing more. But a county clerk testified that Victor's deed transfer was riddled with fraud. Judge Draper struck her gavel. Victor's claim was void. The ranch and guardianship of Thunder belonged to Daniel Kearns. Outside, the sun burned gold across the valley. Thunder lifted his head from the trailer, amber eyes catching Daniel's. For the first time in years, Daniel felt his chest fill with an unbroken breath. Back at the ranch, the work began. He patched roofs, reset fence posts, cleared the fields. Ick's sweat and dust smeared his arms as the hammer rang out across the valley. Thunder watched from the pasture, lifting his head each time the hammer struck, as though acknowledging the fight to bring the place back to life. Trust grew slow. At first, the horse ate only when Daniel stepped away. Then one frostbright morning, Thunder brushed his muzzle against Daniel's shoulder, brief and gone. Not affection acceptance. By winter, snow lay heavy across the valley, but the house no longer sagged in ruin. Firelight glowed through the windows. The barn was clean, Thunder bedded on fresh straw. His breathing carried into the night, a steady rhythm like a second heartbeat. The ranch no longer felt abandoned. It lived again. For the first time in a long while, so did Daniel.